Monday, the 7th of May, 2018, 10:09 AM Eastern Standard Time. The sun's shining, the flowers blooming, the day advancing. However, not everything shone, not everything bloomed, and not everything advanced. In fact, for the world surrounding Zoie Burgher, the forecast was quite adverse. In a series of revealing tweets, she let the world know of her condition, her circumstances, and her state, figuratively and literally. The tweets indicated that the once renowned sexual provocateur had taken a sharp nosedive into oblivion. A sad story. But how did she meet this fate? And more importantly, why? Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to The Right Opinion, the home of a twat with too much free time. And today, I take a look at Zoie Burgher. Zoie Burgher is or was a Twitch and YouTube streamer. On the surface, that sounds fairly unexceptional, but Zoie had a twist, and a few twerks too. She originally started involving herself in social media around the year of 2013, while she was attending university. That's relatable. At least I assume it was around then, as that was when her Twitter account was created and activity initiated. But it wasn't until 2016 where she became particularly notorious amongst anyone within the commentary sphere for being extremely provocative with her content. But there was a lot more going on beyond the surface. As a Twitch streamer, she was banned 4 times. However, finding her feet on YouTube, she hit 1 million in no time at all. That is pretty incredible. I remember when I first came across her, and I was almost stunned at the speed of such growth. Even with the reputation garnered being carried over from Twitch, it seems she was destined to smash the platform. After all, there's always going to be a demographic for her sort of content, right? Zoie Burgher, the face of YouTube. Didn't quite happen, did it though? In fact, as quickly as the success came, it just halted. And as of right now, she is on the same subscriber count that she was on in December 2016. Given her ascension was only in the space of a few months before then, the sudden cessation was almost unbelievable. Now, it's not exceptional for someone to fall as quickly as they rise, and there are many scenarios in which this has occurred, but for something as consistently, dick hardening for many young whippersnappers, a stagnation seems at least slightly more difficult than she made it out to be. Plenty of other provocative females on the platform have been known to flaunt their physicality, and they can hold on to their ground. On top of that, it wasn't like she hadn't tried to branch beyond shaking her ass. In fact, she had also attempted to start up her own little brand known as Lux. It's clear that she invested a lot in this, and we'll investigate that more in a bit. However, when the first generation of this little squadron exited at the end of 2017, Zoie greeted 2018 with open arms and vowed to give the next set of recruits all new and exciting opportunities. Mansion shoots, production, filming. Zoie had a vision. However, on the 8th of April, that came to an end, with Lux devolving, and just over a month later came the tweet in question, followed by numerous more tweets that represented a unique turn in character from the once rather explicit streamer. Where there is a rise and there is a fall, there is an explanation. For both. I thought I'd conduct my own little inquiry into little details that led to the ascent and subsequent descent for one of the most shameless characters on the platform. Without further ado, let's get right into it. If you use Twitch, you'll know that they run a pretty tight ship for a lot of their content, particularly for that which may include provocation. Provocative is one way of describing Zoie Burgher's content, and one word that I'm probably going to be using a lot today. So when she was kicked off inevitably, it was not a surprise, not even to Zoie. However, she did not seem too bothered. After all, she found YouTube and an environment that perfectly fostered her meteoric rise to stardom, or whatever you wanna fucking call it. It seems unlikely that Zoie was the first Twitch streamer to ever be sexually provocative. I'm sure there were plenty before, and there were plenty since. However, she was definitely one of the first to be able to gain significant traction from it, and unlike her contemporaries, there was no ambiguity about it. She knew what she was doing when she was shaking that ass and pulling the views. I wanted to get a snapshot of her old Twitch, however, for some reason, the Wayback Machine carried on telling me that all the screenshots for her channel had been shipped to another castle, which is fantastic. Either way, I was not impressed. I also wanted to be able to piece together a slightly more detailed timeline, but unfortunately, she sometimes just appeared to forget to fill in the text boxes, so a follow account was often a mystery. However, with a bit more digging, I did manage to find an old image taken before she went viral in March 2016, showing that she had a decent amount of traction. In fact, briefly after one of the occasions she was banned and had her account returned, she reported receiving a shout out from Rice Gum of all people.
Face hella greasy little Caesar. Say you twerking, but it's looking like a seizure.
Isn't that curious? so this inevitably gave her some groundswell. And eventually, when she was kicked off Twitch the 4th time, she moved to YouTube. With a significant amount of momentum, she managed to kickstart the channel. You have a collection of highly active subs at that point. That looks great to a lot of algorithmic mechanism, so she gained and gained and gained, and it effectively snowballed. But what did that snowball like?
Booty!
2016 was a strange year. Gaming channels were in a tight spot. They hadn't effectively died like they had sometimes, such as the pre-Fortnite drought. However, there was a sentiment of stagnation, and they needed a hero, someone to give it a new lease of life. Zoie Burgher. Zoie Burgher appealed to the fact that there is a significant demographic within the gaming industry that are hormonal virgins who jump to the chance to watch someone juggle such personality with gameplay. Her thumbnails hit the sweet spot, and a lot of people justifiably asked why on earth she was gaining any attention at all. Why were people donating to see someone shake their ass when they could watch someone shake their ass for free anywhere else? That's an interesting question. I think the idea of specific donations within the streams themselves almost gave the donor a perverted sense of power. The fact that they had control. They were making her shake her ass. The virtual representation of going to a strip club for them and throwing money at the hookers. Having someone shake their ass for them. It was a nice little scheme that set her apart and knew how to appeal to certain psychological switches in the mind. Now, of course, this brought into question many moral challenges, with many content creators attempting to have her channel terminated, but the lines were so blurred that it was simply impossible to remove her from the platform. It also didn't help that a lot of people were just attempting to eject her because she was busting that booty. And if you've seen the latest music video for Tiger, for example, and multiple other artists within the music industry, you'll understand that if YouTube were to ban Zoie Burgher, there'd be even larger policy inconsistencies than the ones they have already. The only deeper question is, should she be shaking her ass for donations from kids who probably aren't completely mature? The problem is, although it's inevitable that it's happened, it's hard to establish the age of such donors. So the best YouTube could do was age restrict the videos, which in all fairness they did sometimes. However, every kid knows how to bypass that. They're not dumb twats. It's an onerous complication to say the least. And riding on the wave, Burgher knew exactly how to take advantage of that. She'd get the clicks, she'd get the dicks. However, when your content is growing fast through the methods of provocation, it gains the attention of something equally ravenous, drama. And damn, was it spicy. You see, there were many commentators who took protest to the fact that her content was on YouTube and that it was being promoted too, so they made videos on it. Now, I must stress, not everyone you make a video on will gain from it. If you can deliver criticism in a damning fashion, then you can stifle someone's growth. In this instance, many commentators were hoping to bring YouTube's awareness to the situation and effectively have her removed. However, in this instance, the drama was a perfect storm to propel her. The criticism that many of these commentators dished out was levied from a point of view concerned with moral conduct. Now, sometimes moral conduct can be fairly black and white, but the moral issue here came with indulgence. So many people responded, well, Zoe's having a good time, the viewers are having a good time too, who's losing? And some of these commentators have significant overlap into the sort of demographic who enjoyed Zoe's content, so no one felt particularly guilty supporting her. She wasn't explicitly abusing anyone, she wasn't touching kids to our knowledge, and the anonymity of the donors allowed people to fill in the gaps with their most ideal scenario to morally justify the system that they were participating in. It was a smart business model that worked perfectly for her. And then there was the drama with Rice Gum. This was one of the few Rice Gum videos that I've ever watched, fun fact. And his acting is terrible. I mean, you can tell he's not being legitimate, and it's very, very transparent. And because once again the whole tone of the video was mild and light-hearted, it just bolstered Zoe even more. And that's what it was meant to do. It was a good scheme by two people in the same network. And through this, Zoe essentially managed to smoothly transition her content from Twitch to YouTube, maximizing her success. She would also regularly make video responses and call out people herself. A lot of her arguments fell rather flat, to be honest. But one thing that never got old was the fact that she could do what she wants, and if YouTube had a problem, they can get rid of her themselves, which was always fairly indestructible. She gradually escalated her escapades, eventually offering news for 1 million subscribers, a goal she reached incredibly quickly. Zoie Burgher was YouTube's next star. She had amassed such a huge amount of followers in no time at all. The empire had been constructed. But what she had constructed was a house of cards, and a gust of wind was just around the corner. How can something be constructed so emphatically yet have so many holes in? Zoie Burgher's glass house was just a stone's throw away for many people ready to take her down, yet the real assailant was herself. What do I mean? Well, we've got time to break it down, so why don't we? Now, novelty isn't always a bad thing. However, there are two key clinchers with it. Two that Zoie herself could not hold on to. Firstly, novelty banks on the fact that no one is doing it, and for certain talents that is fine. There are some very niche persuasions that would take excessive amounts of effort to reach any sort of distinguished level of skill at all. With all due respect to her craft, Zoie Burgher's brand of shaking her ass in front of the camera was not anything exceptional. The only noteworthy element was that she was the first to mix all of these elements together. But once people know the recipe, they're gonna get cooking. And as PewDiePie's recent content on various Twitch streamers has showed, there's always an audience, and whereas Zoie was banned from the platform, many of these new females very carefully walk the line between what is acceptable and what is not. So by even being allowed on Twitch, this new set of creators had an advantage. And so when more creators came along and the competition intensified, it no longer became a case of who did it first, it became a case of who was doing it best. The second problem with novelty is that it can't just be a gimmick, which is what a lot of Zoie Burgher's sexual content was. It was a gimmick. She was known as a person who twerked on Call of Duty streams for money. That was the hook. In one of her earlier videos, she says that she's aware she doesn't have the most personality, and yes, she doesn't. And that's a problem. Brief, spur-of-the-moment trends and titles can give you a significant following, but that following won't stick around if you don't have anything to bring them back for. Unfortunately, there was nothing that many people who watch Zoie Burgher would come back to enjoy, and as the competition rose and people found other streamers, the motivation to return to her content was less and less. And although it didn't have to be that way, she didn't really help herself in any situation either, and probably accelerated her downfall. You see, I've never enjoyed the "you're just giving them attention" argument, because even if it does bring someone some increase in attention over the short term, it can have significant effects in detracting from them long term, and Zoie Burgher is a perfect example of this. She isn't very good at arguing. At first it was alright, she was arguing against people who she could definitely frame as quite imposing, and she was this defender of being able to do what she wants. That was fine. But then you had other people, such as Pyrocynical, whose videos weren't just aimless rants, they were more nuanced takes on what she might be doing wrong. Although her response may have quickly gained attention because she's responding to Pyrocynical, Pyrocynical's response video has 3 times the views that his original one does. And even when your whole business model is based around twerking, a bit of integrity is still important, and once the drama faded, there just wasn't interest. She had been shown to be a hypocrite one too many times, and she couldn't just fall back onto the same excuses that she had before, because not everyone is going to argue whether she should or should not be on the internet. There are going to be people who take more moderate positions. The only reason that she released a response to Pyrocynical was because it would get viewed, and saying that she doesn't make the type of video multiple times doesn't change the fact that she made the video and fucked up because her line of argument was just weak. However, this wasn't the end of the drama. You see, we just mentioned gimmicks, and obviously when your channel is partly composed of a gimmick that has an expiry date, you gradually escalate and escalate and escalate the antics to maintain viewership. It's like a roller coaster. You extend the incline a bit further, but only heighten the inevitable drop. This was represented by a situation regarding nudes. The nude offering was that escalation for Zoie Burgher. She was going to give all the viewers nudes at 1 million subscribers. And she hit 1 million. And obviously, in an attempt to avoid channel termination, didn't really show any nudes at all. And all the horny young lads who were subscribed to her for it experienced great disappointment. This was Zoie Burgher's most prominent stunt, but at the same time it represented the beginning of the drop for that roller coaster ride. And as the subs bled and she was hit with another copyright strike, which I must clarify was for an unrelated video, she lashed out at everyone under the sun, from SS Sniper Wolf to FaZe Clan to Daddy Rice Gum, quite clearly trying to start anything, but that ship had sailed, and Zoie was still at the port. Can you maintain a consistent state of drama? Yes, I do believe you can, but it has to be constantly adapting and evolving to the necessary circumstances. A lot of Zoie's drama was, oh my god, she shakes her ass for money. It's quite two-dimensional, and eventually it's a debate that you realize both sides are not going to compromise on. People become bored and move on. You can just hope YouTube is on your side, right? 2017. It wasn't the best time to be any sort of R-rated YouTuber. I've mentioned him before, but Nerd City made a great video documenting his findings on a study conducted by researcher CeeLo. The results showed that if your video was rated M for mature, it was likely to significantly affect the views and promotion that it receives. This was not a friendly algorithm to someone like Zoie Burgher. Now, gameplay channels were already being marked with an M, and on top of that, her other offerings to these videos were pretty mature. Much of her work was age restricted, and if your videos are age restricted, you know that it dies a horrible death on the algorithm. And let's face it, YouTube wouldn't want someone like Zoie Burgher to be one of their most sizable channels. And in all fairness, she did try other content where she still behaved seductively, but with a slightly more marketable vibe. However, this essentially put her in a paradox because the original appeal was how downright shameless she was. And at this point, her switching content to stuff marginally more dignified was like attempting to polish a prostitute. She either could do the more crude content and risk being punished by YouTube, or do more sophisticated works and undermine her whole appeal in the first place. 2017 was not a good year to be anything on YouTube, especially Zoie Burgher, and in her defense, she did anticipate that. However, with that said, although her channel wasn't on the hot streak that her original content was, there was still the odd couple of videos that seemed to do well, and although it was definitely quite turbulent, it wasn't fully dead. So what killed it? What was the nail in the Zoie Burgher coffin? Let's talk about Lux. Lux was Zoe's gaming initiative that would branch beyond her. It was her all-female gaming team, and it was going to reach a new demographic. Now, on paper, this is not a disastrous idea. Having a few extra people does create a new dynamic, and although it can sometimes water down individual personalities, I don't think personality was ever Zoe's strong point, and therefore multiplying the number of on-screen asses wasn't exactly an awful idea. This was something that Zoe clearly felt passionately about, and she was promoting it tirelessly. Many of her videos had gone just from her to this new acquired squad. The views weren't exceptional, but they were consistent, what she needed to keep going. However, many of the problems that plagued Zoie Burgher on her own remained prominent on Lux. They still didn't have a huge grip on the personality, there was nothing exceptional about their gameplay. Unfortunately, they're just not the most skilled people. As the videos decreased in number, the views did too. And then on the 21st of December, two of the founding members announced their departure from the group. The door was closing on Zoe. She had exhausted multiple options at this point. The lone streams weren't doing the numbers, the Lux streams didn't quite carry the burden necessary, so what could she do? On the same night that the girls tweeted out about their exit, Zoe put out a video in which she explained that she had great plans for Lux and that it wasn't over. She was going to be putting 110% into it. Everything, balls to the wall. And that's what we needed, in a way. We needed a balls to the wall Zoie Burgher, but it's not quite what we got. On the 2nd of February 2018, Zoe released her trailer for the new Lux. This one was more glamorous, higher production value, and all-round more polished. The first episode was dropped on their own dedicated channel, and shit, it was a huge bomb. And it was even worse considering the visible investment being made in it. And it's time to explain everything that went tragically wrong with this. Firstly, they should not have put it on a separate channel. That was a terrible idea. It may have been an attempt to give it its own unique branding, but it just opened it up for a new torrent, away from the protection of her retained fanbase. Any seasoned YouTuber will tell you that as soon as you have a like-dislike ratio lower than 50%, then YouTube pull the video from recommended altogether. So given the fact that these were pretty much blitzed by dislikes, it killed any prospect that it had of growth. The content itself, although not entirely incompetent, was just rather boring. It was plagued by the problem that all Zoe's content was plagued by, a lack of personality. Increasing the number of people also didn't help, given the chemistry was just rather stilted. I accept that they hadn't known each other for long when they filmed, but you have to take that naivety and turn it into something riveting, and there was nothing cinematic about it. They spent around a third of the episode in a fucking limo. Only a selection of compelling events can occur within the confinement of a limo. I was more interested in how it obtained that huge dent, and why they used an instrumental that sounded like a bargain barrel version of an old Dennis Edwards song.
What the fuck is that?
Well, here, let me show ya.
In case anyone wonders how I know these things, it's because I breathe music. But anyway, back to the point. It was clearly trying to be higher in its production value than it actually was, and because of this, it did not gain an identity. It didn't manage to take a direction, and therefore it could not keep viewers engaged. And that's not even the most gaping issue. And I can't believe I'm saying that. But the most considerable reason why this failed is because it was the most visible example of how Zoie Burgher lost sight of what made her popular in the first place. As I said earlier, she acknowledged that she wasn't a tour de force in personality, so the idea of basing something around their personality is insane. It's career suicide. Unfortunately, a lot of people are not interested in the plight of booty streamers, and I'm really sorry to say this because we all have our own struggles and inner demons, and we shouldn't necessarily hide them from the world. But Zoie could not sell that to an audience, and after a lot of the initial drama undermined her credibility, she was never going to present her character as compelling or even refined or legitimate. People followed Zoie for her buttocks, and I'm sorry, and although it's shallow, it's a culture that I would not agree with, but in effect that's the way it is, and Zoie was aware of that, and embraced it. She loved it for a moment. She made her bed, and she lay in it. After 3 episodes with diminishing returns, the second Lux group disbanded. It is fair to say that it was Zoie's worst mistake, and unfortunately it led us here today. It was a foolishly ambitious move, and I know that risk-taking is sometimes a necessity to gain success. However, she should have realized that the odds were stacked against her in this instance. So why on earth would she chase something so destined to fail? Well, to be honest, from what I've watched, it was her trying to get back in touch with the authentic element, who she really was, even though it became grossly warped. And it takes me to my final point. One of the constituents that I found myself observing fairly frequently when watching her content was how forced a lot of it was. The twerking was like a routine, personality was non-existent, nothing felt genuine. In her drama videos, she contradicted herself innumerable amounts of times, the emotion seemed contrived, and it led me to the conclusion that she was either desperately lacking in self-awareness or she was running on one concept which she only knew how to handle by stretching it out further and further. And as she felt herself getting sucked into this hole, she just attempted to tighten her grip on the few handles that she had hold of. Boom. And that all imploded. And unfortunately, you cannot do that forever. Sometimes, as creators, and we're desperate, we find something that works, but then to maintain it, we do it more, and more, and more, and more, and we keep hoping that we find gold and recapture the original magic that vaulted us into stardom. However, time transpires, and people lose their interest because you built your kingdom on rickety foundations. That's what Zoie Burgher stood on. A lie. A lie that this is what she wanted. A lie that this is what she needed. And with all the drama, and with all the bullshit, she dug herself a deeper and deeper hole. She tried to retain what made her famous. She tried to galvanize her career through Lux, and then she tried to touch on something more bona fide. And everything just led to a dead end because the original concept that she constructed herself on was not sustainable. Unfortunately, in the YouTube game, you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become irrelevant. And that's the problem with Zoie. It's the end for her. And this takes us to the Twitter post and the ones after that showed what we should have seen. It was a desperate act that went on for much longer than it should have. Zoie unfortunately caught herself in something that many investors would call the sunk cost fallacy. The idea that we stay invested in something based on our previous investments in the hope that it gets better, but it doesn't. But we keep doing it until we have nothing left, and we're moving back to our parent state. These things won't alleviate themselves unless we find a way to branch it out. But Zoie had worn out a lot of the appeal that many people had found in her to begin with. It was all opportunistic ass shaking, and as my previous segments have documented, that's not enough in the modern environment when you're competing with people who have advantages against you in all departments. And unfortunately, although I think Zoie was willing to change, she went into various different industries that she had equally insufficient skill sets to succeed in. She turned down this bizarre road, and that's what confused me the most. It was like throwing the anchor out on a sinking ship. Even as the water reached your waistline, it was a delusion. In one video that is distinctly more realistic than others, she laments all these decisions that she's made, and for the first time, it was kind of sad. It didn't feel like she was just crying to try and emotionally appeal to the Twitch gods to let her back in. It felt like she realized where she stood, and it left her empty. When we act to maintain an image, it takes its toll, especially in cases like Zoie Burgher's, where there was clearly a subconscious yearning for a return to something more genuine, something more innocent, and looking back on her legacy as the Twitch streamer who exploited a little more than cleavage for views, yeah, I'd be pretty disappointed too. She thought Lux could provide that sort of fresh start, but all it did was create business relationships with people who she considered friends before, which subsequently broke down the genuine elements of her life that she valued. Above all, what I've observed is that Zoe's just too impulsive with how she acts. As she says in this video, she really tries to save money, but often that doesn't happen. She has a vision and chases it, and it doesn't work out. And that's how this whole thing started. Lux was not a realistic passion, and it was not going to launch her. She was someone twerking on camera for the dollar. And that is fine, but she never thought about how that might change. She never thought about how to adapt to altering environments. Even when she consciously acknowledged her own flaws, she acted like a person in denial, hoping that the audience would somehow take to her. She thought that she could transition and escape the stigma, while forgetting that it was simultaneously the stigma that made her popular in the first place. By deserting that audience to pursue something idealistic, when she returned, the audience wasn't there either. She basically dug her own grave. Zoe, you're never going to have that respect from a majority of people. I'm sorry, but that is how you popularized yourself. Unfortunately, twerking is not a personality trait, it's a gimmick, and if you have nothing else to supplement that, it will become tiresome very quickly. Your rise was too fast to be true, your fall too fateful to be false. And this is where I'd like to leave a message to you, the audience. If you want a career that will be known fondly, supported through times when you trend and times when you don't, if you want to pursue other careers and still want that core fan base who may not have great interest in it, it's about respect. Zoe's whole gimmick was self-objectification, a concept inherently antithetical to the notion of respect, and whenever she tried to go deeper, she came across as lousily shallow or easily debunked. This prevented her from being able to develop a character, as she was trying to base her developments off a character that even she didn't believe in. And that's such an important point. If you want to develop yourself, I think that's great, but it has to come from a genuine place, and everything about Zoe's persona was synthetic. If you want to try and develop something fake, all you do is expose how fake it truly is. People came for brainless content. You try and give it a brain and you'll just end up with some fucked Frankenstein's monster of a persona that doesn't compel anyone, because it doesn't make sense, and when you expand as much effort as Zoe did trying to make sense of it, it will inevitably fail, and that is sad. I don't think there's anything wrong with exaggerated and elaborated personas. Everyone's persona is slightly different from their personality, but keep them based in reality. Base them in some form of respect, any form of respect, and you will vastly increase your chances of longevity on this platform. There are often faster and easier ways to success, but it's only a matter of time before they become highly precarious. Zoie Burgher is a prime example of that. She was only interesting when she was being something that she wasn't, a gimmick that was exposed when she tried to return to her roots, and has led us to this sorry situation. I hope she finds herself, but I do not think it will be on this platform. I think it's time for her to give it a break and move on. What do you think of Zoie Burgher? I'd love to hear your diagnosis. Let me know in the comments below. I'd also like to give a humongous thanks to the editors who have done another great job on this. I'm going to leave their links down below, and you should definitely check them out if you have the chance, and send them some love. Without that talent, this channel would not be here today, so I really can't thank them enough. I also get asked a lot what sort of content I enjoy, and I'll often retweet it on my Twitter, which is @TheRightOpinion. However, I also have a group of creators who I really think have great potential, known as the NCO, and we tweet out their content on the @NCO_tweets. I'll leave that link in the description below and pinned comment too. You can reach me on Facebook and Discord, though I don't promote content beyond my own on there. Anyhow, I'd like to thank everyone for the support of recent. It's been very impressive and it means a lot, and I look forward to chatting with all of you in the future. Until then, however, I'm The Right Opinion, and I'll see you in the next one.